Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a fine example of what happens when game developers actually work with passion. In fact, the game is apparently so good that it somehow became the highest user-rated game ever. It is also a fine example of what happens when Unreal Engine 5 is actually used correctly, with the game running relatively well on hardware that should be running it well in the first place, unlike with many of the poorly optimized UE5 monsters, like this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. Now, Clair Obscur asks for a GTX 1060 or an RX 5600 XT and an 8th gen i7 or Ryzen 5 1600X, but you guys voted for me to go on a special expedition, which goes by the name of Intel Edition Potato 630. This right here is my 2017 Lenovo Legion Y520. It's powered by this 7th gen i7 and a GTX 1050 non-Ti, and I'm gonna put it up against Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Now, as you may have guessed already, my laptop, which gets around 20 to 25 FPS at 5 below with the GTX 1050, is already below the system requirements of the game. But my Chinese socialist laptop has a little secret. See, its CPU, the 7th gen i7, comes with integrated graphics, aka the Intel HD Graphics 630, which I've decided to use instead, because if I used the GTX 1050, I would have to change the title and the thumbnail of the video, otherwise I would have been lying to you guys, and lying is really bad. To ensure the game utilizes the Intel HD graphics and not the GTX 1050, I disabled the latter using the device manager. But I quickly came to the conclusion that perhaps running a 2025 game at 60 FPS on Intel HD graphics was not going to be an easy task. First of all, the game would only launch in DX11 mode. If you try to run it in DX12, the game would forget that the Intel HD 630 actually does support DX12 and just tell you that the Intel HD 630 actually doesn't support DX12. And that's not very good, because the DX11 mode has a ton of bugs, with the shadows being completely glitched and many objects being super blocky or flat out missing. Oh well. With the low settings and 30% of 1024x768, at first things seems to be okay. I mean, the main menu ran okay and it did load my save, but as soon as that was done, the game briefly ran before deciding that it had enough and freeze. Yeah, just like that. And starting a new game results in the new game having a fatal error. Actually, I was able to solve the freezing and the fatal error. All you need to do is use a little thing called DXVK. DXVK can be used to make most games run in the usually more stable Vulkan instead of DirectX. The last version of DXVK that works on Intel HD graphics is 1.10.3. The link is in the description. Because Clair Obscur is a 64-bit game, we're gonna be using the 64-bit version of DXVK, of course. And to install DXVK for Clair Obscur, drag and drop these two files onto this folder, which you can access from the game directory. Using DXVK, not only was the game no longer crashing or freezing, but in fact it was actually running somewhat well. I mean, less than 15 FPS isn't exactly great, but it felt fairly responsive, and hell, in some instances we can get up to more than 20 FPS. That's quite impressive for a game that asks for an RX 5600 XT. Okay, very good, but what about the prologue? Okay, never mind. I think this is actually somewhat bad now. But you guys are here to see the Intel HD 630 run
Clair Obscur
at 60 FPS. So, it's time for some modding! Now, to achieve our goal, we're gonna go top definitive with the definitive performance mod! The mod comes in 8 presets. Lossless, not related to the 8-bit duck cap, quality, balanced, performance, potato, monstrosity, and finally these two ones for that thing. Now, out of all these presets, we're most interested in one of them, the monstrosity one of course. To install the definitive performance mode, first of all, choose the preset that you want, then go to users, your Windows username, updater, local, send4, saved, config, Windows. Finally, drag and drop these two files into that folder and well, that's it. Using that preset of the definitive mod, we have successfully converted Expedition 33 from an already buggy mess to, quote, a monstrosity. I know this looks very beautiful, just like Selfie, but I can make it even more beautiful. Did you know that you can also disable the anti-aliasing by adding a simple line to the engine.ini file? First of all, make sure to set the file to not be read only, then open it with Notepad. Now scroll down here to the custom variables line and down here type r.anti-aliasing method equals 0. Save the ini file and set it to read only again, otherwise the game will delete it. In addition, you can lower the main resolution below the lowest allowed one, by default 1024x7681, this time by modding the game user settings.ini file. This time we don't have to set it to not be read only and vice versa. By changing these two values, we can change the resolution to a different one, such as 640x400, which is already low enough. Otherwise, if you're extremely desperate, you can change it to 320x200. Okay, if you guys don't want Expedition 33 to look that pixelated, you can set the main resolution to 640x400 and increase the resolution scale from the settings to 50%. And with the monstrosity preset of that definitive mod and the anti-aliasing disabled, plus 50% of 640x400, we're now getting 60 FPS. Let's go! Yeah! Okay, almost 60 FPS. Actually, sometimes when looking down, we can indeed get 60 FPS, and even slightly more than that. The FPS can differ quite a bit depending on where you are and what you're doing. For example, when freely roaming around, we can usually get 30 plus FPS quite easily. However, during battles, the FPS will still drop to the teens. But hey, at least it's smoother than before, although that certainly doesn't make me better at battles. Okay, so far, so good. But what about the prologue? Oh my god. Okay, you know what? Let's just ignore the fact that we're still getting single digit FPS in the prologue. Because hey, when you look down, you get really good FPS. So yeah guys, if you want good FPS in games, make sure to look down. I mean, in Clair Obscur you cannot always look down, but keep it in mind still. While we can sometimes get 60 FPS when looking down or in less demanding areas, there is another trick to make this 2025 UE5 game run at 60 FPS at least most of the time on Intel HD/UHD Graphics. That's right, I'm talking about the Duck app once again. With the base FPS of the game locked to 15 using River Tuner and lossless scaling frame generation 3.1 or 2.3, with the multiplier set to 4 or the mod set to x4 and the floor scale set to as low as possible. Of course, I have enabled performance mode for the frame gen, and finally, using a lightweight but ugly scaling type such as integer, we can indeed make
Clair Obscur
run at 60 FPS, aka 15 FPS converted to fake AI 60 FPS most of the time. I mean, the ghosting was absolutely awful and everything looked even more blocky and pixelated, but at least I didn't feel all that much input lag. However, as soon as you go to a really demanding area, like in the prologue of course, the utilization of the Intel HD630 will go to 99 or 100% and those AI 60 FPS will drop. But hey, what matters is that I made
Clair Obscur.
Expédition 33.
one at 60 FPS on Intel HD graphics, and here we even saw slightly more than that at one point, so at least I didn't lie to you, I think. Okay, maybe I did. I don't know at this point. Have a nice day.